A few months ago, I challenged myself to paint all of the Cosmere RPG Stormlight miniature set using just speed paints, and I learned 7 things that I'm going to share in this video with you. Hey, I'm Josh, and this is Cosmere in Miniature. I initially started this challenge with a specific goal in mind, and that was to answer the question that I'd seen plaguing so many new painters on Reddit and on Discord. People were always asking, what paint should I get to paint these miniatures? Because they wanted to play in their Cosmere RPG games, and they wanted to have nice painted minis for it. And whenever I saw it online, someone asked that question, they would get 10 different responses from people, and none of them were the same. Everyone has different recommendations on what paints to use. I have my own opinion, other people have their own opinions, right? And I realized asking what paint should I get to paint the Stormlight miniatures is like asking what reading order to read the Cosmere in. No matter who you ask, it's going to be divisive, and people are going to have different opinions, and based on their own experiences, they're going to tell you different things. So I wanted to try something, and I wanted to say, hey, if I had a limited budget and I didn't have a lot of time to paint and I was new to the hobby, what is the paint set that I should get that should cover most of the Cosmere RPG Stormlight set? And so I took a look at the Army Painter's Speed Paint starter set. It has 10 paints in it, along with a paintbrush. And I've talked about the difference between acrylic, traditional paints, and speed paints. The basic gist of it is speed paints are supposed to handle a lot of the grunt work of traditional acrylics, because speed paints are supposed to give you a base coat, as well as a shade, as well as a highlight, kind of in one go. Now, as I'll go into details here, that may or may not have happened on some of these minis, but it seemed like a really good option for a new painter to the hobby and someone who just wanted to get paint on these minis and on the tabletop as quick as possible and painlessly as possible without breaking the bank to get these minis painted. So with that in mind, I had already painted a few of the Cosmere RPG set, but I was looking at the rest of the minis. The majority of them had yet to be painted. And so I picked up the paint set and I got to work. So here's some things I learned. Number 1, speed paints in the name, they are fast. The 3-in-1 base coat shade highlight is mostly accurate. Some of the simpler minis took less than 30 minutes to do. And in my experience, painting of high quality or a good miniature for the tabletop, anywhere between an hour to 2 hours. So speed paints really cut back on that time that I had to invest in it, and it turned out pretty well. Number 2, painting of speed paints is crucially important. So I say this because with traditional acrylics, they're more opaque, and so you kind of paint on there, and if you make a mistake, you can go back in and paint over it just fine. With speed paints, they are more translucent because they seep into the crevices and show the highlight below it. And so, first of all, you have to start with a good primer, a light primer, whether that's Zenithal or slap chop, whatever method you choose, right, is important, because whatever colors below it will show through on the next layer that you paint on. And so it can be really difficult to apply to a single smooth surface, because if you overlap at any point and it's dry on the other side, it will look very streaky. And so it's really obvious when you miss things or the coverage wasn't even, and so that those mistakes kind of popped through. And the third thing there is related, right? The mistakes are very difficult to cover up, if at all possible, with just speed paints. Now, losing the ability to effectively cover up those mistakes was difficult for me because I'm used to acrylics, but with speed paints, the more you use them, the better you are at understanding where you can and can't use them. Fourth thing is damage to your brushes. I don't know if damage is the right word here, but when you're painting with speed paints, I typically just do the dropper bottle on my dry palette, got it on my brush, and put it right in the bottle. Later on, I use speed paint medium, which I'll talk about. But I noticed as I was drying out the brush on my paper towel, I would see flecks of paint come off into the paper towel. And that was from the dried speed paint in the bristles that was coming out in the water and then also on the paper towel. So there's a lot of leftover gunk that is in speed paints, more than there are in traditional acrylics. Number 5 is I didn't need to use my wet palette, and I personally am starting to really not like using a wet palette because it's just lots of maintenance. And so I used a dry palette, and it works great. You just drop it right on the dry palette, take your brush, go for it. However, it would dry out a lot faster, obviously. And so, yeah, I had to learn how much paint do I need on the palette right now that I'm going to use in the next few minutes, right? So just being more paint volume aware was important. And this is where I actually prefer the contrast Citadel pot holders for the paint pots, because you open up the paint pot and then you can dip in there over and over again and it doesn't dry out, right? So that is a win for the Citadel paint pots, although most of the time I like the dropper bottles of Army Painter. Number 6, speed paint medium is awesome. Near the end of my own challenge to myself, I decided to pick up speed paint medium, and it really helped, number 1, with keeping the paint alive longer, so I had more minutes with the paint that I could be a little bit more careful with. It also opened a lot of different options for the tone or the saturation of the colors that I was using. So for example, on my Elsa color, I wanted to do gray pants, and I didn't have gray in the starter set, I only had black. And so what I did is I had black, the grim black, and I put in speed paint medium, mixed it together, and got a pretty thin glaze that I was able to glaze on the pants. And then I used regular grim black on the shirt. Immediately there was this nice little contrast between the shirt and the pants that I wasn't able to get before. And so speed paint medium is fantastic. Highly recommend picking that up as well. Number 7 is taking pictures of my speed painted minis is a humbling experience, because you really see all the details that you can't get at with just speed paints. And zooming in and trying to make those paint recipes that I've been making, as was said on my Discord server, a photo adds 10 pounds. In mini painting, it shows 5,000 mistakes on every single mini that you've done. And so it's really kind of not exciting to take pictures of it. They look great from my shelf. Like, I look at them and they're fantastic. But when I put them up close, take a picture of it, zoom in, you see all the mistakes, and then you become self-conscious about your painting ability. So if you're doing this and you're not that great of a painter or a mediocre painter like myself, don't get hung up on taking really close-ups of your minis. Just leave them on the table, leave them on the shelf. They'll look great from a distance, and that's okay, right? So now that I've completed the challenge to myself, it's great because I have all painted minis of the Cosmere set, RPG set, and I'm already thinking of ways that I could come back and paint over some details with traditional acrylics, but at the end of the day, they're painted. And so I probably won't come back to them. If I'm gonna paint them again, I'll probably just print out new ones. But now I've become much more confident with speed paints, and I have lots of ways that I can use speed paints alongside traditional acrylics. But at the end of the day, my verdict for are you able to use just the Army Painter Speed Paint starter set to paint the Cosmere RPG miniatures? I will say 80% yes, you can. If you pick up Rudy Fur, Ashen Stone, Fire Giant Orange, and Speed Paint Medium, that will get you up to 100%. Confidently can say that. And you're not going to be winning a Golden Demon or any kind of super fancy painting award for your work, but you're going to get decently painted minis quickly without a lot of hobby supplies. You won't have to pick up a new hobby of miniature painting if you don't want to, but you'll be able to get them all painted and on the tabletop and on your Sandershelf. You may have to deviate from the art guide a little bit here and there because some of the paints are included in the starter set, but overall, they'll look great. So if you have yet to buy any paints, but you have the minis, I encourage you to follow my advice here and tell me how it goes. Until then, remember that the most important mini that you can paint is the next one.